In the year 2347, humanity had come a long way since its humble beginnings on Earth. No longer confined to a single planet, humans now thrived across dozens of star systems, their colonies scattered like glittering jewels in the vastness of space. They were explorers, builders, and dreamers, always pushing boundaries, always finding solutions where others saw only obstacles. But even the most optimistic among them couldn't have predicted what was about to happen. Captain Ilara Voss stood on the bridge of her ship, the Odyssey Dawn, staring out at the swirling nebula beyond the viewport. It was a breathtaking sight, a canvas of purples, blues, and golds that stretched endlessly into the void. Her crew moved around her with practiced efficiency, monitoring sensors, adjusting trajectories, and ensuring everything ran smoothly. This was supposed to be a routine mission, to map uncharted regions of space and look for signs of life. Nothing unusual, nothing dangerous. But then it happened. "Captain," called Lieutenant Marachen, her voice sharp with urgency as she leaned over her console. "We're picking up something big, really big." Ilara turned sharply toward the young officer. "Define big," she said, her tone calm but curious. Mara hesitated for a moment before answering. "It's a fleet. Hundreds of ships, at least 3 times the size of ours. And they're heading straight for us." The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of machinery. Ilara stepped closer to the main screen, which flickered to life moments later. What appeared there made her heart skip a beat. An enormous armada filled the display, each vessel gleaming with cold precision under the light of a distant star. These weren't just ships. They were fortresses, bristling with weapons and radiating power. At the center loomed a massive command vessel, easily 10 times larger than the Odyssey Dawn. Whoever these aliens were, they meant business. Before anyone could react, a deep, resonant voice boomed through the ship's communication system. It wasn't in any human language, but the translation software kicked in almost instantly. "Attention, unknown vessels," the voice declared, dripping with authority. "You are trespassing in territory claimed by the Zorathian Galactic Empire. Surrender your coordinates and prepare for assimilation or face annihilation." For a moment, no one spoke. Then, laughter erupted from the crew. It started with Lieutenant Chen, who let out an incredulous chuckle. Others joined in quickly, until the entire bridge echoed with mirth. Even Captain Voss couldn't help but grin. To the Zorathians listening on the other end, it must have sounded absurd. A group of tiny, insignificant beings laughing in the face of overwhelming force. But to the humans aboard the Odyssey Dawn, it felt natural. After all, this wasn't the first time someone had threatened them with destruction, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. When the laughter finally subsided, Ilara addressed her crew. "All right, people," she said, her voice steady and confident. "Let's show these so-called emperors why we don't take ultimatums seriously." Back on the Zorathian flagship, Admiral Kalfar frowned deeply. He had expected fear, panic, maybe even defiance. But laughter. This reaction puzzled him. Who were these strange creatures, and why did they seem so unafraid? For the first time in centuries, doubt crept into his mind. Perhaps conquering humanity wouldn't be as simple as he'd assumed. Admiral Kalfar was not accustomed to confusion. As the supreme commander of the Zorathian Galactic Empire's 7th Fleet, he had spent centuries enforcing his people's dominance across the stars. His empire spanned thousands of worlds, its armies and fleets unmatched in size and strength. Yet here he was, staring at the holographic display of a tiny human ship, the Odyssey Dawn, wondering why its crew had laughed at his ultimatum. "What is this?" Kalfar growled, turning to his communications officer. "Are they mocking us? Do they think we are jesters?" The officer hesitated, clearly nervous under the Admiral's piercing gaze. It appears so, my lord," he stammered. "Their laughter suggests either madness or arrogance." Kalfar clenched his fists but said nothing. Madness didn't seem likely. The humans' technology was advanced enough to detect their fleet and respond coherently. Arrogance, however, was another matter entirely. Could these small, fragile beings truly believe they could stand against the might of the Zorathian Empire? It was inconceivable, and yet the laughter lingered in his mind like an itch he couldn't scratch. On the Odyssey dawn, Captain Ilara Voss gathered her senior officers in the briefing room. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, as she addressed them. "All right, team," she began, her tone calm but serious. "Let's talk about what just happened." Lieutenant Mara Chen raised her hand tentatively. "Permission to speak freely, Captain." "Of course," Ilara replied with a small smile. "Always." "Well," Mara said, shifting uncomfortably, "why did we laugh? I mean, those ships are enormous. They could crush us without breaking the sweat." Ilara nodded, understanding the concern. "Because," she explained, "this isn't the first time someone has tried to intimidate us. History shows that threats like theirs rarely hold up when faced with humanity's greatest weapon, adaptability. We've survived wars, plagues, natural disasters, you name it. Every time we're pushed into a corner, we find a way out. That's why we laughed. Not because we're arrogant, but because we know who we are." Her words resonated with the crew, and nods of agreement rippled through the room. Still, there were practical matters to address. "They'll want answers," said Commander Ravi Patel, the ship's tactical expert. "And if their ego is bruised, they might retaliate before we can explain ourselves." Ilara stood up, pacing slowly. "Then let's give them something to think about. Mara, prepare a historical presentation for them. Something visual, something impactful. Show them how humanity has overcome impossible odds throughout history. Ravi, analyze their fleet movements and see if you can spot any weaknesses. If diplomacy fails, we need to be ready." As preparations got underway, Admiral Kalfar decided to send emissaries to the human ship. He wanted to understand these strange beings better before making any rash decisions. 2 sleek Zorathian shuttles detached from the main fleet and approached the Odyssey dawn. When the emissaries boarded, they were greeted by Captain Voss herself, flanked by her officers. "Welcome aboard," Ilara said warmly, though her eyes remained sharp. "I assume you're here to ask why we laughed." One of the emissaries, a tall, insect-like creature with shimmering exoskeleton armor, stepped forward. "Indeed," it rasped. "Your reaction was unexpected. Explain yourselves." Ilara gestured toward the holoprojector in the center of the room. "Very well," she said. "Let me show you who we are." Images began to play on the projector. Ancient battles fought with primitive weapons, astronauts landing on the moon, scientists curing diseases, engineers building cities among the stars. Each scene highlighted humanity's resilience, creativity, and determination. The Zorathians watched silently, their expressions unreadable behind their helmets. When the presentation ended, the lead emissary tilted its head. "Impressive," it admitted. "But such feats are irrelevant compared to our empire's millennia of conquest." Ilara smiled faintly. "Maybe. But don't underestimate what happens when you combine ingenuity with sheer audacity." The emissaries left soon after, carrying more questions than answers. Back on the flagship, Admiral Kalfar studied the data they brought back. Something about these humans unsettled him. Not fear, exactly, but curiosity. Perhaps conquering them wouldn't be as straightforward as he'd thought. And somewhere deep within the vastness of space, a challenge was brewing, one that neither side would soon forget. The Zorathian emissaries returned to their flagship, their minds buzzing with conflicting thoughts. The images and stories presented by Captain Ilara Voss had been fascinating, almost mesmerizing, but they struggled to reconcile what they'd seen with the reality of the tiny human ship before them. How could such a small, seemingly insignificant species accomplish so much? Admiral Kalfar listened intently as his emissaries recounted their experience aboard the Odyssey dawn. "They claim their strength lies not in brute force," one of the emissaries reported, "but in creativity, adaptability, and ingenuity. Their history is filled with examples of overcoming impossible odds." Kalfar narrowed his glowing eyes, his mandibles twitching slightly. Creativity, he muttered, the word tasting foreign on his tongue. Such qualities are irrelevant against superior firepower. Prove it if they dare. Ilara Voss, meanwhile, was already planning her next move. She knew the Zorathians wouldn't take her words at face value. They needed tangible proof of humanity's capabilities. That evening, she called another meeting with her senior officers. "We've shown them our past," Ilara said, pacing slowly in the briefing room. "Now we need to show them our present and our future. Prepare a demonstration of our most advanced technologies. Let's make sure they understand that humanity isn't just about storytelling. We're about action." Commander Ravi Patel nodded enthusiastically. "I'll start with the quantum shielding system. It's still experimental, but it's far beyond anything they've likely encountered." Lieutenant Mara Chen added, "And don't forget the AI-driven tactical systems. If we can show them how quickly our ships adapt during combat simulations, it'll blow their rigid strategies out of the water." By the time the Zorathian emissaries returned for their second visit, the Odyssey Dawn was ready. This time, the humans led them to the ship's engineering bay, where holographic displays and live demonstrations awaited. Commander Patel stepped forward, gesturing toward a shimmering energy field surrounding a section of the hull. "This is our quantum shielding technology," Patel explained confidently. "It adapts in real time to incoming threats, neutralizing projectiles and energy weapons alike. Even your largest cannons would struggle to penetrate it." The Zorathians exchanged skeptical glances. One of them pointed a clawed finger at the shield. "Prove it." Without hesitation, Lieutenant Chen activated a test sequence. A high-powered laser fired from a nearby turret, aimed directly at the shield. The beam struck the barrier and dissipated instantly, leaving no damage behind. The emissaries leaned closer, their insectoid heads tilting in fascination. Next, Ilara introduced the ship's artificial intelligence, codenamed Argus. Through a series of holographic projections, Argus demonstrated its ability to analyze battlefield data, predict enemy movements, and deploy countermeasures within milliseconds. The AI even simulated a mock battle scenario, showing how a single human ship could outmaneuver an entire squadron of Zorathian vessels using deception and precision strikes. Despite their initial skepticism, the emissaries couldn't hide their growing unease. These humans weren't bluffing. They were showcasing technologies that rivaled, or perhaps surpassed, their own. Yet pride kept them from admitting it outright. When the tour ended, the lead emissary turned to Ilara. "Your innovations are impressive," it admitted grudgingly. "But innovation alone does not guarantee victory. Our empire has conquered civilizations with far greater resources than yours." Ilara smiled faintly, her tone measured but firm. "True, but you've never faced a species like ours. We don't fight because we enjoy destruction. We fight because we refuse to give up. And when push comes to shove, we find ways to win, no matter the odds." Back on the Zorathian flagship, Admiral Kalthar reviewed the reports from the emissaries. Doubt gnawed at him. For centuries, the Empire had relied on sheer force to crush its enemies. But these humans, they were different. Their unpredictability made them dangerous. What if their laughter wasn't arrogance but confidence born from countless victories over adversity? As he stared out at the stars, Kalthar realized something unsettling. The humans weren't just a potential threat. They were a mirror reflecting the fragility of his own empire's dominance. And that realization left him more uneasy than any weapon ever could. The Zorathian emissaries returned to the Odyssey Dawn one final time, their demeanor noticeably colder. Though they had been impressed by humanity's technological advancements, their pride refused to let them concede any ground. Instead, they issued a challenge, a mock battle in neutral space. "If your claims of superiority are true," the lead emissary declared, its voice dripping with condescension, "prove it in combat. If you win, we will leave your territory untouched. If you lose, you must surrender 3 of your core colonies." Captain Ilara Voss listened carefully, her expression calm but calculating. She knew this was a test, not just of strength, but of strategy and resolve. Outnumbered 10-1, victory seemed impossible by conventional standards. But that was exactly why she accepted. Agreed, Ilara said firmly, extending her hand. But remember this, underestimating us is your first mistake. Preparations began immediately. Back on the Odyssey Dawn, the crew worked tirelessly to ready their ship and coordinate tactics. Commander Ravi Petal devised a plan centered around deception and agility rather than brute force. Lieutenant Mara Chen programmed the AI system, Argus, to simulate countless scenarios, ensuring every possible outcome was accounted for. Meanwhile, Admiral Far oversaw the assembly of the Zorathian fleet. Hundreds of sleek, heavily armed ships gathered in the designated neutral zone, a vast expanse of empty space dotted with asteroid fields and drifting debris. To him, this exercise was more than a contest. It was an opportunity to crush the humans' confidence once and for all. When the day of the mock battle arrived, both sides took their positions. The Zorathians formed a tight formation, their ships bristling with weapons and shields glowing ominously. In contrast, the human fleet, consisting of only 10 vessels, including the Odyssey Dawn, spread out loosely, appearing disorganized and vulnerable. As the countdown ended, the Zorathians launched their assault. Wave after wave of plasma torpedoes and energy beams surged toward the human ships. But instead of retaliating directly, the humans activated their decoy drones, small, unmanned crafts designed to mimic the signatures of larger vessels. The Zorathians, locked into rigid hierarchical commands, wasted precious resources attacking illusions, while the real human ships slipped through their defenses undetected. Using the chaos to their advantage, the humans deployed hacking probes disguised as asteroids. These devices infiltrated the Zorathian network, sowing confusion among their ranks. Orders became garbled, targeting systems malfunctioned, and entire squadrons turned on each other, believing phantom enemies surrounded them. From her command chair, Ilara watched the unfolding chaos with quiet satisfaction. "Ravi, now," she ordered. Commander Patel nodded and executed the next phase of the plan. The human ships fired not destructive weapons but electromagnetic pulses, EMPs, disabling critical systems aboard the Zorathian vessels without causing permanent damage. Within minutes, the once mighty armada was rendered inert, its ships drifting helplessly in space. Admiral Kalthar stared at the display in disbelief. His fleet, one of the most powerful in the Empire, had been neutralized without a single shot fired back. The humans hadn't just won. They had dismantled his forces with precision and finesse. When the simulation concluded, the Zorathian emissaries contacted the Odyssey Dawn. Their voices were strained, almost trembling. "We acknowledge your victory," one of them admitted reluctantly. "But how did you achieve this?" Ilara smiled faintly. "Because we don't fight fair," she replied. "We fight smart." Back on the flagship, Admiral Kalthar sat silently in his command chair, his mind racing. For the first time in centuries, he questioned the infallibility of the Zorathian Empire. Perhaps there was more to these humans than met the eye. And perhaps their laughter hadn't been arrogance after all. It had been a warning. The aftermath of the mock battle rippled through the Zorathian fleet like a shockwave. Admiral Kalthar sat alone in his quarters, staring at the glowing tactical display that still showed the remnants of his once proud armada. Each disabled ship was marked with a red icon, a stark reminder of humanity's ingenuity and adaptability. His mind churned with questions he couldn't silence. How could such a small species outwit us so easily? What does this mean for the Empire? In the command center, whispers spread among the officers. Some admired the humans' cleverness, while others seethed with anger, blaming the defeat on poor leadership or overconfidence. The tension grew thicker by the hour, threatening to fracture the disciplined unity the Zorathians prided themselves on. Meanwhile, aboard the Odyssey Dawn, Captain Ilara Voss gathered her senior officers for a debriefing. Unlike the Zorathians, Her crew buzzed with excitement and pride. They had proven their worth against overwhelming odds, but Ilara knew better than to celebrate too soon. "This isn't over," she said firmly, pacing back and forth in the briefing room. "We've shown them what we're capable of, but now we need to decide what comes next. Do we push for peace or do we prepare for war?" Lieutenant Mara Chen hesitated before speaking. "Captain, I intercepted some encrypted communications from their flagship. There's unrest brewing among their ranks. Some of their leaders seem divided about how to handle us." Ilara raised an eyebrow. "Divided? Explain." Commander Ravi Patel took over, pulling up a holographic projection of the Zorathian hierarchy. "From what we can gather, there's a faction within their military pushing for immediate retaliation. But others, possibly even Admiral Kalfar himself, are questioning whether outright conflict is the best course of action." A thoughtful silence fell over the room. Finally, Ilara nodded. "This is our chance. If we play our cards right, we might turn their internal divisions to our advantage." That night, a young Zorathian lieutenant named Trenvok approached the human ship under the cover of darkness. Disguised as part of a routine supply transfer, Tren carried critical information that could change everything. When Lieutenant Chen escorted him aboard the Odyssey Dawn, the nervous officer handed over a data crystal. "This is classified intel from the Empire's central archives," Tren whispered, his voice trembling. "It shows cracks in their system, corruption, resource shortages, rebellions on border worlds. Their empire isn't as strong as they want you to believe." Ilara studied the alien carefully, noting the fear in his glowing eyes. "Why are you helping us?" she asked. Tren hesitated, then spoke softly. "Because I don't want my people destroyed." Your laughter during first contact, it wasn't arrogance, it was hope. And maybe your way of thinking could save us too. Back in her quarters, Ilara reviewed the data with her team. The revelations were staggering. The Zorathian Empire, despite its outward appearance of strength, was crumbling under its own weight. Over centuries of expansion, they had stretched themselves too thin, relying on brute force rather than innovation to maintain control. Entire sectors were on the brink of rebellion, and resources were dwindling faster than anyone admitted. "This changes everything," Ilara murmured, leaning back in her chair. "If we fight them head-on, it'll be a bloodbath. But if we offer them a lifeline—" "What kind of lifeline?" Mar asked, frowning. "An alliance," Ilara replied, her voice steady. "Instead of destroying each other, we show them another path, one where cooperation replaces conquest." The idea sparked heated debate among her officers. Some argued it was too risky, that trust couldn't be built overnight. Others saw potential in turning enemies into allies. By morning, Ilara had made her decision. She sent a message directly to Admiral Kalfar, bypassing formal channels. "Your empire is dying," she wrote plainly, "but it doesn't have to end this way. Let us help you rebuild, not as conquerors, but as partners." For Kalfar, the words struck deep. He had spent his life serving the empire, believing in its invincibility. Yet now, faced with undeniable evidence of its fragility, he found himself questioning everything. Was destruction truly the only path forward? Or was there another way, a way forged not by weapons, but by understanding? As the sun rose over the distant nebula, both sides stood at a crossroads. Humanity had planted seeds of doubt in the heart of the Zorathian Empire. Now, all that remained was to see which direction those seeds would grow. The message from Captain Ilara Voss hung in the air like a challenge, one that Admiral Kalfar couldn't ignore. For hours, he sat alone in his command chamber, staring at the holographic projection of her words. "Your empire is dying, but it doesn't have to end this way." At first, anger surged through him. How dare these humans, these insignificant beings, presume to lecture him about his own empire? But as time passed, the anger gave way to something else: curiosity. If humanity could outwit his fleet and expose cracks in his civilization's foundation, Perhaps they had more to offer than just mockery. Kael'thar summoned his senior advisors for an emergency council. The room buzzed with tension as officers argued over how to respond. Some demanded immediate retaliation, calling the humans' proposal an insult to Zorathian pride. Others, however, urged caution, pointing out that the humans' technological prowess and strategic brilliance could be valuable assets, if harnessed correctly. "We are not weak," one general snarled, slamming his fist on the table. To accept their help would be an admission of failure. And yet, Kael'thar interrupted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Failure stares us in the face. Our resources dwindle, our borders crumble, and rebellion festers within our own ranks. Would you rather cling to pride or ensure the survival of our people?" His words silenced the room. Slowly, grudgingly, the council agreed to hear the humans out. On the Odyssey dawn, Captain Ilara Voss prepared for what might be the most important meeting of her life. She gathered her team in the briefing room, laying out her plan. "This isn't just about avoiding war," she explained. "It's about showing them another path, a future where strength comes not from domination, but from collaboration." Commander Ravi Patel nodded thoughtfully. "But trust won't come easily. They'll need proof that we're sincere." Ilara smiled faintly. "That's why we'll bring everything we've got to the table. Quantum shielding, AI systems, sustainable energy solutions, all of it. We'll show them that working together benefits everyone." When the diplomatic summit began, both sides met aboard a neutral space station orbiting a dying star. The setting was symbolic, a reminder of what could happen if they failed to find common ground. As Ilara stepped into the chamber, flanked by her officers, she faced Admiral Kael'thar and his entourage. Tension crackled between them, but there was also a glimmer of hope. Ilara opened the discussion. "Admiral, I won't pretend your empire is perfect, but neither is mine. What I'm offering isn't charity. It's partnership. Together, we can solve problems neither of us could tackle alone." She gestured to Lieutenant Mara Chen, who activated a holographic display showcasing humanity's advancements. First came quantum shielding technology, capable of protecting entire planets from asteroid impacts or hostile attacks. Then came medical nanotechnology, designed to heal wounds and cure diseases faster than ever before. Finally, she presented sustainable energy solutions, fusion reactors powered by hydrogen harvested from stars, providing limitless power without depleting natural resources. The Zorathians watched in stunned silence. These innovations weren't just impressive. They were revolutionary. For centuries, the Empire had relied on brute force and exploitation to maintain its dominance. Now, here was a species proposing a new paradigm, one rooted in progress, sustainability, and mutual benefit. One of Kael'thar's advisors leaned closer to him, whispering urgently, "My lord, imagine what we could achieve with such technologies. Imagine the lives we could save." For the first time in decades, Kael'thar felt a spark of optimism. He turned to Ilara, his tone measured but sincere. "You claim you wish to help us. Prove it. Show us how these technologies work, not just for yourselves, but for all of us." Ilara nodded, knowing this was only the beginning. Over the next several days, human engineers worked alongside Zorathian scientists, sharing knowledge and building prototypes. Slowly, skepticism gave way to admiration. Even the hardest skeptics began to see value in cooperation. By the end of the summit, a tentative agreement was reached: shared research initiatives, joint exploration missions, and open trade routes. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. As the two delegations parted ways, Admiral Kael'thar approached Ilara privately. "Captain Voss," he said, his voice low, "you have given me much to consider. Perhaps laughter is not always a sign of arrogance, but of possibility." Ilara smiled. "Possibility is what keeps us moving forward, Admiral. Let's make sure it moves us in the right direction." And with that, two civilizations took their first steps toward a brighter future, one forged not through conflict, but through innovation and understanding. The fragile truce between humanity and the Zorathian Empire hung by a thread, its survival dependent on trust that had yet to fully take root. While Admiral Kalthar and Captain Ilara Voss worked tirelessly to build bridges, not everyone within the Zorathian hierarchy shared their vision. Deep in the shadows of the Empire's political labyrinth, a faction of hardline generals plotted to destroy the budding alliance before it could gain momentum. General Vorkan was among the most vocal opponents of peace, a decorated warlord with centuries of conquest under his belt. He viewed humanity as an insult to the Zorathian legacy of dominance. "They are vermin," he spat during a secret meeting with his co-conspirators. "Weaklings who dare mock our greatness. If we allow this so-called partnership to continue, it will weaken us further." His followers nodded grimly, their glowing eyes reflecting determination or desperation. Together, they devised a plan. Launch an unauthorized attack on a human colony, framing it as rogue elements acting without central approval. The goal was twofold: to provoke humanity into retaliation and to discredit Kalthar's leadership. Unbeknownst to them, Lieutenant Trenvok, the young Zorathian officer who had previously aided the humans, overheard fragments of their scheme. Torn between loyalty to his people and fear for what might happen if the conspiracy succeeded, Tren made a risky decision. He reached out to Lieutenant Mara Chen aboard the Odyssey Dawn, sending an encrypted message warning of the impending strike. When Mara received the alert, she immediately brought it to Captain Voss. "It's not confirmed," Mara said cautiously, "but Tren believes they're targeting New Haven, a major human settlement." Ilara frowned, her mind racing. New Haven wasn't just any colony. It was one of humanity's oldest and most prosperous outposts, home to millions of civilians. An attack there would devastate morale and likely spark full-scale war. She turned to Commander Ravi Patel. "Ravi, can we verify this intel?" Patel studied the data stream, his fingers flying across the console. "It's patchy, but consistent with patterns we've seen before. Fleet movements, supply chains shifting toward the edge of neutral space. I'd say it's credible." Ilara didn't hesitate. "Then we act. Alert all nearby human ships and prepare defensive measures. And get me Admiral Kalthar. I want him to know about this immediately." When Kalthar received the call, his mandibles twitched in frustration. "This cannot be happening," he muttered, pacing his quarters. If the rebels succeeded, it would undo everything he and Voss had worked for. Worse, it would confirm the worst fears of those who doubted humanity's intentions. "I'll send reinforcements to intercept them," Kalthar promised, though his voice carried a note of uncertainty. "But many of my officers are resistant to cooperation. Some may side with the insurgents." Ilara understood the gravity of the situation. Trust was still fragile, and even well-meaning actions could backfire. "We'll handle it," she assured him. "But you need to make it clear to your people that this attack isn't sanctioned by the Empire. Otherwise, we risk losing everything." As the human fleet mobilized, the rebel Zorathians launched their assault. Their massive warships descended upon New Haven like predators circling prey. Energy beams lashed out, striking infrastructure and scattering terrified colonists. But the humans were ready. Using decoy satellites and EMP bursts, the defenders disrupted the attackers' coordination, forcing them into disarray. Meanwhile, holographic projections created illusions of additional human ships, making the enemy believe they were outnumbered. The battle raged fiercely, but thanks to careful planning and quick thinking, the humans managed to repel the invaders without significant civilian casualties. Back at the heart of the Empire, news of the failed attack spread quickly. When evidence surfaced implicating General Vorkan and his allies, outrage erupted among the Zorathian populace. Civilians, already weary of endless wars and resource shortages, demanded accountability. Admiral Kalthar seized the opportunity, publicly denouncing the rebels and rallying support for continued cooperation with humanity. For Ilara Voss, the victory was bittersweet. The attack had proven that peace wouldn't come easily. But it had also shown that humanity and the Zorathians could stand together against common threats. As she watched footage of New Haven's survivors beginning to rebuild, she felt a glimmer of hope. "We stopped them this time," Commander Pottle remarked, standing beside her. "But there will be others like Vorkan. How do we keep moving forward when so many want to drag us back?" The fallout from the failed attack on New Haven rippled across the Zorathian Empire like a seismic wave. General Vorkan and his co-conspirators were arrested, their treachery exposed not only to the military high command, but also to the public. Admiral Far wasted no time in addressing the Empire's citizens through a live broadcast, his voice steady and commanding as he stood before a holographic backdrop of the galaxy. "This act of rebellion was an affront to everything we stand for," Calfar declared, his glowing eyes piercing through the screen. "It endangered innocent lives, both human and Zorathian, and threatened to undo decades of progress. But I promise you this, such betrayal will not go unpunished." The message resonated deeply with the Zorathian people. For too long, they had endured endless wars, dwindling resources, and fractured leadership. Now, faced with undeniable evidence of corruption within their own ranks, many began to question whether conquest was truly the path forward. Some even dared to whisper about following humanity's example, finding strength not in domination, but in cooperation. Meanwhile, aboard the Odyssey Dawn, Captain Ilara Voss convened her senior officers for a strategy meeting. The mood was tense but hopeful. They had successfully defended New Haven, but the rebels still posed a significant threat. Several rogue fleets loyal to Vorkan remained at large, hiding in remote sectors of space and plotting further attacks. "We can't let them regroup," Commander Ravi Petal said firmly, pointing to a map of known rebel hideouts displayed on the holoprojector. "If we strike now, while they're scattered and disorganized, we can neutralize them before they cause more harm." Ilara nodded thoughtfully. "But we need to be smart about it. This isn't just our fight. It's theirs too." She turned to Lieutenant Marachen. "Reach out to Admiral Calfar again. We'll propose a joint operation, humans and Zorathians working side by side to take down these insurgents." When Mara relayed the plan to Calfar, he hesitated briefly before agreeing. Though the idea of collaborating so closely with humanity made him uneasy, he recognized its necessity. "Very well," he replied. "But if this fails, the consequences will fall on both our shoulders." The operation, codenamed Unity Strike, began under the cover of darkness. A combined fleet of human and Zorathian ships slipped into uncharted territory, hunting down the remnants of the rebel forces. What set this mission apart wasn't just its scale, it was the unprecedented level of coordination between the two species. Engineers from both sides worked together to modify weapon systems, while tacticians shared strategies that blended Zorathian discipline with human ingenuity. The first major engagement took place near a derelict asteroid base, where the rebels had established a stronghold. As the Allied fleet approached, the rebels launched a desperate counterattack, firing salvos of plasma torpedoes and energy beams. But the invaders were ready. Using advanced decoys provided by humanity and precise targeting algorithms developed by Zorathian scientists, the Allied forces dismantled the rebel defenses with surgical precision. Lieutenant Trenvok played a crucial role during the battle, guiding human pilots through unfamiliar terrain and identifying weak points in the enemy's fortifications. His bravery earned him respect among the human crew, particularly Captain Voss, who commended him personally after the skirmish. "You've done your people proud, Lieutenant," Ilara told him as they stood on the bridge of the Odyssey Dawn. "Without your help, this victory wouldn't have been possible." Tren bowed slightly, his antennae twitching with emotion. "And without yours, my people might never have seen another way forward. Thank you, Captain." As the operation continued, more rebel strongholds fell one by one. Each success strengthened the bond between humanity and the Zorathians, proving that collaboration could achieve what neither species could accomplish alone. Civilians on both sides began to see the potential of unity, not as a weakness, but as a source of unparalleled strength. By the time the last rebel ship surrendered, the tide had turned irrevocably. General Vorkan was tried and sentenced to exile, his name erased from the annals of Zorathian history. In his place rose a new era of leadership, one guided by principles of mutual aid and shared purpose. Admiral Cal Thar addressed the galaxy once more, this time alongside Captain Ilara Voss. Standing side by side, they delivered a unified message. Together, we have faced chaos and emerged stronger. Let this be a lesson to all, that even in the darkest moments, there is always hope when we stand united. With the rebels defeated and General Vorkan exiled, a fragile but promising peace settled over the galaxy. Humanity and the Zorathian Empire were no longer adversaries. They were tentative allies, bound together by shared victories and mutual respect. Yet neither Captain Ilara Voss nor Admiral Cal Thar believed their work was done. True unity required more than just ending hostilities. It demanded effort, compromise, and trust built over time. The first step came in the form of joint engineering projects. Engineers from both species collaborated on constructing a massive space station near the border between human and Zorathian territories. Dubbed Harmonia Nexus, the station served as a symbol of cooperation, a neutral ground where ideas, resources, and cultures could be exchanged freely. The design itself was a blend of Zorathian precision and human creativity, with sleek metallic structures intertwined with glowing energy conduits powered by humanity's fusion reactors. Lieutenant Mara Chen found herself working closely with Zorathian technicians, learning their language and customs while teaching them about Earth's history and values. At first, communication was awkward. Misunderstandings arose frequently, but patience and humor helped bridge the gaps. One day, after hours of debugging a malfunctioning power grid, Mara joked, "If we survive this project, maybe they'll let us build something simpler next time, like a paper airplane." Her Zorathian counterpart, an engineer named Silrock, tilted his head in confusion before emitting a series of chirps that sounded suspiciously like laughter. It was one of many small moments that reminded everyone how much they had in common despite their differences. Meanwhile, Commander Ravi Patel spearheaded efforts to integrate AI systems developed by humanity with Zorathian tactical networks. The result was revolutionary, a hybrid system capable of predicting threats, optimizing resource allocation, and fostering faster decision-making across both fleets. During testing, Admiral Cal Thar marveled at the efficiency of the new system. "This is unlike anything we've ever seen," he admitted grudgingly. "Perhaps there is wisdom in your approach after all." But not all progress was technical. Cultural exchange programs flourished as well, bringing humans and Zorathians closer than ever before. Artists from Earth showcased their works aboard Zorathian vessels, sharing paintings, music, and stories that celebrated resilience and hope. In return, Zorathian performers introduced humanity to intricate light dances, an art form using bioluminescent appendages to tell tales of ancient battles and celestial wonders. Captain Voss took part in these exchanges personally, attending the Zorathian ceremony honoring fallen warriors. As she stood among the towering insectoid beings, listening to haunting melodies played on resonant crystal instruments, she felt a profound sense of connection. These weren't monsters or conquerors. They were individuals who grieved, dreamed, and hoped just like her own people. Still, challenges remained. Whispers of dissent lingered on the fringes of the empire, where rogue factions continued to oppose cooperation. Some Zorathians viewed the alliance as weakness, while others feared losing their cultural identity in the face of change. On the human side, skepticism persisted too. Colonists worried about sharing technology, and politicians debated whether reliance on Zorathian support compromised Earth's independence. To address these concerns, Ilara and Cal Thar launched a series of public broadcasts highlighting the benefits of collaboration. They shared stories of lives saved through medical nanotechnology, planets protected by quantum shielding, and economies revitalized by trade. Slowly, resistance began to wane, replaced by cautious optimism. One evening, as the two leaders walked along the observation deck of Harmonia Nexus, Califar turned to Ilara. "Do you think our peoples will ever truly understand each other?" he asked, his tone uncharacteristically vulnerable. Ilara smiled softly. "Understanding takes time, but if we keep building bridges, not walls, I believe we can get there." As the stars shimmered outside the viewport, casting their light on two vastly different yet increasingly united civilizations, the future seemed brighter than ever. Together, they were proving that even the widest chasms could be crossed when hearts and minds opened to possibility. The grand ceremony aboard Harmonia Nexus marked a turning point in the history of both humanity and the Zorathian Empire. Representatives from countless worlds gathered under the shimmering glow of holographic constellations, their voices blending into a symphony of hope and unity. Leaders from both civilizations stood side by side on a raised platform, ready to sign the historic treaty that would seal their alliance. Captain Ilara Voss watched the scene unfold with quiet pride. She had come so far since that first encounter with the Zorathians, a meeting filled with laughter, confusion, and mistrust. Now, as she looked out at the sea of faces, human and Zorathian alike, she saw something extraordinary, a shared vision for the future. Admiral Califar stepped forward to address the crowd, his deep voice resonating through the chamber. "For centuries, my people believed strength was measured only by conquest," he began, his glowing eyes scanning the audience. "But today, we have learned a new truth. True strength lies in cooperation, in understanding, and in working together toward a common goal." When it was her turn to speak, Ilara took a deep breath before stepping up to the podium. "Humanity has always faced challenges head-on, not because we are fearless, but because we refuse to give up. Together, we've proven that even the greatest divides can be bridged when we choose empathy over enmity, progress over stagnation, and trust over fear." As the leaders signed the treaty, applause erupted throughout the station, echoing like waves crashing against the shore. The document pledged mutual aid, open trade routes, joint exploration missions, and a commitment to resolving conflicts peacefully. It wasn't perfect. It couldn't erase centuries of prejudice or prevent all future disagreements, but it was a start. After the formalities ended, celebrations spilled into every corner of Harmonia Nexus. Fireworks exploded in vibrant bursts outside the observation windows, painting the darkness of space with streaks of gold, blue, and crimson. Inside, humans and Zorathians mingled freely, sharing food, stories, and laughter. For the first time, many realized just how much they had to learn from one another. Lieutenant Mara Chen found herself dancing awkwardly alongside Silrock, who had mastered the art of spinning in sync with Earth's upbeat music. Nearby, Commander Ravi Patil explained the intricacies of chess to a group of fascinated Zorathian officers, while Lieutenant Trenvok recounted tales of his homeworld to an eager human journalist. Amidst the festivities, Ilara sought out Califar, finding him standing alone near a viewport. "What do you think your ancestors would say if they could see this moment?" she asked gently. Califar paused, considering her question. "They would call me a fool for trusting outsiders," he admitted. "But perhaps they would also recognize that survival requires change. And sometimes, change brings unexpected blessings." Ilara nodded thoughtfully. "We're still figuring things out, aren't we? There will be bumps along the way, moments where doubt creeps back in. But I believe we'll keep moving forward, not because it's easy, but because it's worth it." As the night wore on, Ilara allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. Humanity had come so far, from fragile beings clinging to a single planet to explorers shaping the destiny of the galaxy. Yet none of their achievements compared to what they were building now, a partnership rooted in respect and possibility. Back on Earth, children gazed up at the stars, dreaming of adventures among the cosmos. On distant Zorathian worlds, Younglings listened to tales of a once hostile species who became allies and friends. Across the vastness of space, bridges continued to form, connecting hearts and minds in ways no one had imagined possible. And somewhere deep within the endless expanse, Captain Ilara Voss smiled. The road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but it was theirs to walk together. As fireworks lit up the galaxy, she whispered softly to herself, "This is only the beginning."